The clock above the emergency room doors didn't move. Or maybe I just couldn't see it anymore, not through the blur. My hands had stopped shaking, but the stillness in my chest was worse. They said it was fast, no pain. One moment he was behind the wheel driving home. The next gone. His name was Miles Lorne, and he was everything I had left that felt like home. The nurse didn't need to say it out loud. She just pulled off her gloves, looked down. I nodded before she could speak. She placed a hand on my shoulder, but it didn't land. I found myself in a plastic chair against a cold wall. My purse was still in my lap, straps clenched in my fists like a lifeline. I didn't think. I dialed. "Mom." My voice cracked. It's Miles." He didn't make it. He's gone." There was laughter on the other end, clinking glasses, music, the faint sound of someone singing happy birthday, then her voice. "Vivian, my mother." "Oh, honey," she said, half distracted. "We're at Camille's dinner right now, her big 3-5. Remember? Everyone's here. We just brought out the cake. Can it wait until tomorrow?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She added, "Try to get some rest, all right. We'll check in soon." And she hung up. Not even a pause. Not even a breath. That night no one came. No knock at the door. No headlights in the driveway. No casserole dishes wrapped in foil. Just the quiet sound of our daughter Sophie breathing in the next room. She was 8, and I still hadn't figured out how to tell her. They didn't come the next morning either. Not the day after. Not even when I stood at the funeral home choosing between coffins and colors of velvet. I signed papers. I called insurance. I learned what words like release remains meant. Alone. I thought maybe they didn't hear me right. Maybe she didn't understand. Maybe it hadn't sunk in yet. But it had. It just didn't matter enough. And I kept wondering quietly in the parts of my mind that still hadn't frozen over. What kind of mother hears her child say he's gone and asks if it can wait? I used to believe love could be earned. That if I stayed quiet enough, got good enough grades, kept my shoes lined up, smiled at the right moments, someone would look up and finally see me. But in our house, there was only ever one spotlight. And it belonged to Camille. She was the kind of girl whose laughter could stop conversations, whose birthday parties had themes and photographers, who cried loudly and was held demanded and received. She wasn't mean, she just took up all the air in the room, and no one noticed who couldn't breathe. I was Harper, the older one by 2 years, the steady one, the polite one, the daughter who vacuumed before being asked, who didn't slam doors or raise her voice. My parents, Vivian and Paul Lorne, never said they loved her more. They didn't have to. It showed in the little things. Camille got her driver's license and a used convertible with a red bow on top. I got bus passes and instructions not to complain. She scraped by in high school and they clapped like she'd made valedictorian. I graduated early. No one came to the ceremony. When I met Miles, I was 24 and holding my breath in every room I entered. He was a paramedic, calm, funny, and so quietly kind that I didn't trust it at first. But he listened. All the way through. Not just the words, but the silences. He proposed in a quiet garden behind our apartment building. We didn't have much, but we had each other. When I called my parents with the news, Vivian didn't congratulate me. She sighed. "Harper, is this really the best you can do?" "He seems average." They didn't come to the wedding, said it was too rushed, too small to be done right, so we eloped. Just me, Miles, and a county judge. I wore a second-hand dress with a torn hem and cried the whole way through, not because I was sad, but because he held my hands like they were sacred. We spent our wedding night in a borrowed motel room with vending machine crackers and a shared can of soda. I had never felt so full. A month later, Camille got engaged. My parents threw her a party with floating lanterns, a jazz quartet, and embossed napkins with her initials. They posted every moment on Facebook. Never asked how married life was treating me. When our daughter Sophie was born, I sent them photos. Tiny feet, a sleeping smile, her first pink hat. Weeks passed. Nothing. Then one Sunday they showed up. Vivian held Sophie like she was fragile, like she might catch something if held too close. "She's sweet," she said, adjusting her pearls. Looks more like Miles than you, though. They left before lunch. They never called for Sophie's birthdays, never sent a card, never asked what she liked. When Camille had twins, Vivian had a nursery built in her home, painted yellow with safari decals. She bought 2 cribs, a diaper warmer, and matching mobiles. Sophie noticed. Of course she did. One night at 4 years old, she asked me, "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa want to play with me?" I opened my mouth, and then I closed it. I wanted to say, because we weren't born to impress, because we were quiet, because we were enough, just not for them. Instead, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "They're just busy, baby." But deep down, I knew we didn't fit their picture, and in my family, love had always come with conditions. The morning of the funeral, Sophie sat on the edge of my bed, her little hands folded in her lap. She didn't ask where Daddy went. She just asked if we had to wear black. I tied the ribbon in her hair myself. Miles always did it better. His fingers were gentler. The church was nearly empty. A few co-workers of his came, paramedics, nurses, a quiet man from dispatch who simply nodded when I said thank you. I tried to remember their names but forgot them the moment I heard the song start. It was the one Miles once mentioned while folding laundry, saying, "If anything ever happens to me, that's the one I want playing." I picked it without hesitation. Vivian and Paul didn't show. Neither did Camille. I kept glancing back at the door. Not because I expected them, because I didn't want Sophie to think no one came for her dad. She held my hand the entire time. No tears. Just quiet breathing and that small, stubborn grip of a child trying to be braver than she should have to be. We went home afterward, just the 2 of us. No wake, no reception, no casserole dishes stacked in the fridge, just silence and a refrigerator full of food we couldn't eat. That night, Sophie drew a picture. It was of our living room, but with one big change: Miles wasn't in it. Just 2 figures, me sitting on the couch, her standing by the window. She didn't say a word. She just handed it to me and went to bed. I placed it on the fridge and stared at it for a long time. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I expected maybe a neighbor, someone dropping off flowers late, but it was Vivian and Paul. She wore a pressed beige blouse. He had on a tie, like they were here for a loan appointment, not to grieve. They didn't bring flowers, no food, no stories about Miles. They sat down stiffly in the living room. Vivian smoothed her skirt and looked around. So she began, "Did Miles leave?" I blinked. "Excuse me." Paul leaned in slightly. "You know we helped with the down payment, back when you bought this house. Just thought it made sense to be transparent. Things can get messy legally." I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, I noticed Sophie standing in the hallway barefoot holding her sketchbook. She didn't say anything, but I saw her watching, and something in me started to shift. They didn't stay long. When they realized there wouldn't be a conversation about shares or fairness that afternoon, Vivian stood up and patted her purse as if to say, "We'll revisit this." Paul mumbled something about talking things through properly, and then they left. Not a hug, not a word to Sophie. Just the sound of our screen door clicking shut behind them. That night, Sophie climbed into bed beside me. She didn't bring her bear, just herself. We lay in the dark for a while, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Her voice broke the silence. They were talking about Daddy's money. I didn't deny it. "What did they mean by split fairly?" she asked. I turned to face her. The streetlight outside cast a soft shadow across her forehead. "Nothing that matters to us," I said, but deep down I felt something harden. Not in anger, something else. Something protective. Something final. The next morning, I called Mr. Doherty, Miles's attorney. He was a quiet man in his 60s with kind eyes and a way of speaking that made you sit still. He had been waiting for my call. "Miles may not have had a fortune," he said, "but he was rich in preparation." He wasn't wrong. There was a living trust, a detailed will, a life insurance policy, a college fund already in Sophie's name, emergency directives, updated beneficiaries. No ambiguity, no room for games. Miles had thought of everything. "I'd like to add an amendment," I told Mr. Doherty. "A no contest clause. I want it locked. No loopholes. No way in." He nodded. "You're the trustee. It's your right." "And it's smart." I left his office with a thick manila envelope tucked under my arm. It felt heavier than paper should, like it carried the weight of all the things I'd spent years swallowing. That night, after Sophie went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a new folder. Not just digital physical, hard-backed, lockable. On the first page, a copy of the trust. Next, life insurance statements. Then a notarized letter from Mr. Doherty outlining my sole authority. After that, screenshots, text messages from Vivian, emails from Camille, and one particularly blunt voicemail from Paul I hadn't planned to keep but now felt glad I had. At the very back, I placed a photo. It was me at 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on my childhood bed, red eyes, arms crossed, and beside me, Vivian staring into her phone. On the back of the photo, I wrote a single sentence. "This was the last time you ever held me." Then I slid it into a sleeve and locked the folder shut. They rang the doorbell like guests, like people with a right to knock. It was 2 days after I locked the folder. Late afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the porch. I saw them through the window, Vivian holding a glass container wrapped in foil. Paul beside her, buttoned up hands in his pockets. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Vivian stepped forward anyway. "We just wanted to check in," she said gently. "See how you're coping. We brought lemon loaf." She handed it to me like a peace offering. I took it without a word and walked into the living room. They followed. It looked the same as always, but something in it had changed. Or maybe I had. Sophie's drawings still lined the mantel. A crayon portrait of her and Miles, stick arms holding hands. The photo of our wedding day still leaned beside the fireplace, Miles in his uniform, me in that second-hand dress, both of us laughing like we didn't need a crowd. Vivian sat on the edge of the couch. Paul remained standing, his eyes scanning the room like he was assessing square footage. There was a pause. Then Paul cleared his throat. "We know this is a difficult time," he said, "and we want to be respectful, but we also want to make sure things are handled fairly." Vivian nodded. Miles was family. He would have wanted everyone to feel included. He was generous like that. I looked at them. 2 people who hadn't called, hadn't hugged, hadn't said his name once since he died. Before I could speak, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Sophie. She was still in her school clothes, navy jumper, white collar, slightly wrinkled. She held something in both hands, a white envelope sealed. She walked across the room calm. "Sure." Stopped in front of Vivian. "This is for you," she said quietly. "That's why you came, right?" Vivian blinked. "Sweetheart, we just wanted to..." But Sophie didn't wait. She turned, walked back to the stairs, and sat down halfway up, her arms hugging her knees. I didn't move. Neither did Paul. Vivian opened the envelope slowly. Inside, a certified copy of the trust, a notarized cover letter, and at the very back, the photo. Me. 6 years old. Forgotten. The note still attached. "This was the last time you ever held me." Paul paled. Vivian didn't say anything. Her mouth opened, then closed. I sat in the armchair across from them, my hands folded in my lap. "Miles left everything to Sophie," I said evenly. "And I'm the one who protects it. That's all you need to know." They didn't argue. They couldn't. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It came in paper, in legal ink, in a child's steady voice. They placed the envelope on the coffee table and stood. No one offered to walk them to the door. Sophie didn't say goodbye. The only sound as they left was the slow groan of the porch floorboards. Like even the house was tired of pretending. The storm didn't come that night. It came the next morning. In waves. Voicemail. Then another. Then 5 more. The first was from Vivian, her voice brittle with disbelief. "How dare you humiliate us like that, Harper? After everything we've done for you." Then Paul clipped in cold. "You think this is over? Just wait until the rest of the family sees what kind of daughter you are." I didn't answer. I didn't block them either. Let them listen to their own voices on repeat. By lunch, Camille called. I stared at the screen for a long moment before picking up. "Look," she started. "I'm not taking sides, okay? But they're our parents. They raised us. They gave us food-a-roo. Maybe just give them something." A gesture, so they don't feel shut out. Her voice had that same practiced softness Vivian used, like she was smoothing tension with sugar. But I was too tired to swallow any more sweetness. "Do you remember your wedding, Camille?" I asked. She hesitated. "Of course, the $35,000 they spent on the venue. The dress, the private chef, all those gold-rimmed menus." "Well, yeah, but—" "And the down payment on your first house." Silence. "I paid for my own wedding," I said. "They didn't even show up." Miles and I slept in a motel that night. No gift, no call. Another pause. Longer this time. "Camille," I said gently, "they raised you. They tolerated me." I ended the call. She didn't call back. That evening, after Sophie went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember why I locked it in the first place. At the very back, tucked behind the insurance paperwork, was a note I hadn't read in weeks. Miles's handwriting, simple, steady. "If anything happens, protect Sophie first. Let the rest fall away." I traced the ink with my thumb. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel strong. I felt still, like I'd finally stopped reaching for people who were never reaching back. The next morning, Sophie noticed the lemon loaf still on the counter, unopened. "Should we throw it out?" she asked. "No," I said, wrapping it in foil. "We'll give it to Mrs. Jensen next door. She just lost her cat." Sophie nodded. She understood. We give to those who show up when it matters. It didn't take long for the story to reach the rest of the family. Not because I told anyone. I didn't. But because people like Vivian don't know how to lose quietly. She tried to control the narrative, told our relatives I'd cut them out, said I'd turned Sophie against her own grandparents, claimed I was unstable with grief. It might have worked once, but something had shifted. One afternoon, I got a text from my cousin Jude, who rarely spoke unless he had something blunt to say. "Your mom's trying to tell everyone you stole from the family. I saw the docs. Sophie's name is on everything. Miles protected you. I respect that." That was it, but it was enough. Later that week, another message, this time from Aunt Renee, a woman who once told me I was too sensitive for not attending Camille's bridal shower. "I didn't know, Harper. I thought you'd pulled away. I didn't realize you were being pushed out." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't offer excuses. Just acknowledgement. Sometimes that's enough too. Camille stayed silent. So did most of the cousins, but the silence felt different now. Not comfortable, not complicit. Just quiet. Vivian and Paul kept trying. They showed up to a family BBQ and were met with polite nods, not hugs. They tried to tell their version again, and no one clapped, because I never fought back, never shouted, never dragged them through the mud. I didn't have to. The folder still sat in my cabinet, locked and untouched, because the truth once spoken clearly enough doesn't need to be repeated. It echoes. We moved in early spring. The new house wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, a maple tree in the front yard that dropped golden leaves like confetti. But it was ours. There were no ghosts here, no memories we didn't ask for, just space. Sophie chose the smallest room, painted it sky blue, and taped her drawings to the wall. No frames, no symmetry, just joy. Her favorites were of animals reading books under trees. She said they felt safe. Sometimes I'd find her at the window in the evening, talking softly to the sky, telling her day to someone she still believed was listening. She started thriving at school, won a regional art contest, organized a mural project for kids who felt left out. Her teacher sent me an email one day. "Sophie has this quiet strength about her, like someone who's been through more than she lets on and came through kinder." I read it twice, then 3 times. I knew where she got that from, but I was changing too. For the first time in years, I joined something. At the community center, I left a small sticky note on the bulletin board. "Grieving isn't weakness. Come sit with someone who gets it." 5 women showed up the first Friday, then 9, then 15. We didn't compare losses. We didn't fix each other. We just sat. We told the truth. And the silence between our sentences did most of the work. One night after Sophie went to bed, I wrote out everything, from the phone call in the ER to the envelope in Sophie's hands. I posted it anonymously on a support forum, titled it, "They Came for the Money." My daughter gave them the truth. It spread faster than I expected. Women replied from all over, some my age, some older, some just trying to breathe through the same kind of betrayal. "This is my story too. You gave me courage. Your daughter is a lion, just like her mother." I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't have to. Instead, I opened a small scholarship fund with the remainder of Miles's life insurance. The Miles Lorne Foundation, for girls raised in silence, for futures no one else believed in. The first recipient was a teenager who'd run away from a house full of shouting and expectations. In her application, she'd written, "I never thought someone would build something for people like us." But Miles had, even if he never saw it bloom. On my nightstand, there's a photo of him. He's holding Sophie on his shoulders, both of them laughing faces tilted to the sky. That night, I picked up the frame, kissed the glass, and whispered, "I kept my promise. She's safe." The auditorium lights were bright, the applause louder than I expected. Sophie stood at the podium in her navy blazer, her voice steady and sure. She had just won the Youth Advocate in Arts and Equity Award for her mural project. Each panel of the mural represented a child who felt unseen. Sophie had painted one of a girl holding a folder locked and glowing gold. She scanned the crowd, found me, and smiled. A real, wide, unafraid smile. I stood and clapped with everything I had. Then, like a ghost that hadn't learned how to leave, my phone buzzed. Vivian. The name lit up the screen. I let it ring. And ring. Then I slid it back into my purse. Outside, the sky had softened pale gold warm. Sophie held her glass plaque in both hands as we walked toward the car. "Mom," she asked, "do you ever miss them?" I paused, then said carefully, "I miss the parents I hoped they'd be, but not the ones they were." She nodded, not sad, just understanding. We stopped for a moment at the hill behind the school. From there, we could see the mural. Bright, brave colors wrapped around concrete like it had always been waiting. There were no portraits of villains. Just strength. Just memory. Just forward motion. Sophie reached for my hand. "Did you ever think we'd be okay?" I smiled through the lump in my throat. He knew we would. He made sure of it. And together we walked down the hill. The light stretched long behind us, not chasing, not retreating, just letting us go.